Today, I'm going to be talking about something that is very common during the breastfeeding experience, but I feel like a lot of moms are blindsided by it and not totally prepared for what to do. Breastfeeding while your baby or you are sick. In this video, I am going to share some practical tips to help your baby feed comfortably while they're breastfeeding if they have congestion or if they have the stomach flu or anything like that. I'm also going to share how to protect your supply and what to do if you yourself get sick. But before we get started, I would love for you to grab my free guide to the first year of breastfeeding. It just has a lot of great resources for helping you make it through the ups and downs of the first year. And you can grab that in the video description below. Whether your baby has a stuffy nose, a stomach bug, fever, or anything like that, knowing how to breastfeed successfully during this time can really make a huge difference. We all know that breastfeeding has a lot of immune benefits, and that continuing to breastfeed will also help your baby to get the antibodies they need to fight off those illnesses. However, it's not always easy to get a baby that is feeling ill to nurse successfully. First, let's talk with congestion. So many babies get congested while they're breastfeeding, and it doesn't necessarily impact their ability to nurse. However, if your baby gets a virus such as RSV, where they are very congested, it can make breastfeeding very uncomfortable for them. That's because it's difficult to coordinate breathing through your nose while sucking, and so your baby is going to prioritize breathing over feeding. If your baby is congested or has an illness where they have a lot of extra mucus, they might start latching and unlatching frequently throughout the feed. They might refuse to breastfeed altogether, or you might just hear lots of nastiness going on when they're trying to nurse, and it can sound very gargly and uncomfortable. I have 3 children and 1 on the way, but the 3 that are here all had RSV as babies, and they were actually all hospitalized as infants with RSV, which was very scary. However, through this, I learned some great tips for actually being able to successfully nurse them. They were able to continue breastfeeding throughout each of those hospitalizations, even though they had oxygen on and they had trouble just eating in general. We never had to do any kind of feeding tube or bottle feeding, and I feel very grateful for that. What I recommend is that before you even start nursing your baby while they are congested, is to get as much of that mucus out as possible. I know there's different opinions out there on nasal aspirators, but I personally think that they make a huge difference. They use these all the time when my kids were in the hospital with RSV. And if you've never experienced RSV, it is so much mucus just all the time. And so they use their hospital grade ones. We had a machine in the past that was very heavy duty, and we actually were able to go home with my 3rd earlier because they knew we had it. However, sometimes you can just use a little bulb or the nose Frida, but if we are dealing with really serious mucus, you don't want to do those. You don't want to be almost making yourself pass out from one of those nasal aspirators that you suck on, and that bulb is not going to do anything. So a really great tool that is available now is the Groansy nasal aspirator. This is a rechargeable, battery-powered nasal aspirator that is very easy to use. Here is a closer-up view of the Groansy nasal aspirator. As you can see, it's pretty lightweight, just fits in your hand. It has a couple of different attachments. This one I like the most, but it has a couple different sizes for different purposes and for older babies. It has the charging cable, so you don't have to have a battery that you're constantly having to worry about, and it doesn't have to be plugged into the wall. It has very easy controls. Here is the power button, and so it has different speeds that you can press to go to a different speed setting with the fan right here, which makes it louder. So there's 3 different speed settings. I definitely recommend starting with the lowest one. It also has a light so you can see better into your baby's nose. That might be a little distracting for your baby with those different colors. And then there's also music. I'm just gonna put my finger on here. It does have a very gentle suck, but it does pull my finger in. Let's go up to 3. It is a lot more intense. If you're gonna use this on your baby, you will turn it on, and then you can change the speed setting, but I recommend starting with lower. You can turn on the light, which is fun and flashing, and then there's music as well. But the basic use is you just gently put it at the tip of your baby's nose. Don't shove it in there because we don't want any bloody nose. We don't want to hurt your baby. And just gently pull out the mucus that's in there. You can do it on both sides. I find that if you press down on one side, it helps to get more of that mucus coming out. Combining this with saline can make a big difference. That mucus then collects in this cup, which you will clean out at the end of each session, and then you can just put it back together. Definitely a great option if your baby's congested. It's easy to use on the go. You can take it with you anywhere. And I have read really good reviews of it, and I can't wait to use it with my own baby. Again, this is the Groansy Nasal Aspirator, and I'll put the link in the video description below. But this will make a huge difference if you're able to clear out your baby's nose before they start to eat. After your baby is all cleared out and ready to eat, I recommend feeding your baby in a more upright position. If they are sideways like this, it can make it very difficult for them to feed successfully. I find babies in this position, especially if the more sideways they are, the worse it is going to be. So trying a lean back position, you can have your baby just leaning back and having them in a more cross cradle position, or you can try the koala position where this is going to keep them even more upright and feeding comfortably. I find this makes a huge difference in your baby's feeding success when they are really congested, just because they are able to be more upright. The fluid is able to drain backwards and not stuck in their nasal passages. It can also be beneficial to have a humidifier in your baby's room that you are running while they're sleeping. This will help you keep the air moist and make it so their noses don't get too dry and that they can breathe a little bit more easily. I personally, whenever my kids have a cough or they have really bad colds, I like to go turn on the shower for about 5 minutes, and then I go sit in there with them for about 5 to 10 minutes, and that can make a big difference as well for clearing up those nasal passages. You also want to consider just doing shorter, more frequent feeds, just so your baby isn't getting overly tired and that they don't start to spit up a ton. I find when there's a lot of mucus involved with feeding, the baby often will spit up way more, and so keeping those feeds shorter and to the point can make a big difference as well. This is really the case for most illnesses because we want to avoid having them throwing up or spitting up too much. And of course, be patient and offer skin to skin. Skin to skin can be one of the greatest tools, and when your baby's feeling sick, they may not be up for full feeds, and so that can make it tricky for your milk supply, especially if you feel like your breasts aren't being drained appropriately. I find that skin to skin can help to counteract that a little bit and help to keep your supply a little bit stronger. It also is going to help you to get more of those antibodies to give to your baby through your breast milk. Those are just a few basic tips for feeding through congestion, and now we are going to go on to if your baby has a stomach bug of some type. Stomach bugs can feel extra stressful because there's often diarrhea or vomiting or both involved. And while this is not fun for anybody that's sick, with infants it can be especially dangerous. So of course, if you ever feel at any time that your baby is getting dehydrated, reach out to your doctor for help. It can be easy to feel like you just shouldn't give them any fluids at all because they're just going to regurgitate them. Sometimes you might hear that you should give Pedialyte, which are a lot of different opinions on that and whether breast milk is just a better option in general, which I would say it is. The good news is breast milk is actually one of the best things you can do for your baby while they have a stomach bug. The reason for this is that it's more gentle on the stomach than most substances, including formula or Pedialyte or juice or anything else that's out there. Your baby's going to get those antibodies that we've already talked about, which is going to help them get over that illness more quickly and is easily accessible because it's just right there. However, there is a real concern for your baby throwing up everything that they're eating. So here are a couple ways to manage getting through that stomach bug. First off, short feeds. I know this can be hard, especially if your baby is just wanting to nurse for comfort, but keeping the amount to be smaller amounts is going to make a huge difference. Generally, if they're able to keep it down a little bit, it's going to at least be enough to give them those antibodies and help to keep them hydrated. I have seen some people just give little syringes of breast milk, especially if the baby is really not wanting to nurse or they're throwing up everything. So you can start out with just a small syringe of breast milk and see how they tolerate it and increase it as needed. If your baby does vomit, you should wait 10 to 15 or even 30 minutes and then try again to do another very small feed and then continue until you start to see them being able to tolerate it better. You know your baby best, and you may go longer or shorter between them, but generally giving them a little bit of time to recover is good. You want to avoid forcing feeds. Our babies are very smart, and if their stomachs hurt and they don't want to eat, don't force them. You definitely are going to want to keep up your milk supply in one way or another, which I'll talk about later on in this video, but you don't want to force the feeds because that can just make things worse. And finally, as I've already mentioned, if you see any signs of dehydration, contact your doctor immediately. Babies can become dehydrated very easily, and we do not want that to happen. So now let's talk about when you are sick. This can be scary. A lot of moms contact me and they say, I have the flu, I have COVID, I have RSV, I have a stomach bug. Can I still nurse my baby? And in almost every situation, the answer is yes. Not only is it going to help your baby to fight off that illness, hopefully, or if they get it, it will help to shorten the illness. but it's going to help you to keep your milk supply up. A lot of times when you are sick, you will see a drop in milk supply. I especially see this with stomach bugs or with COVID or the flu. And so it can be really hard on your supply if you are not emptying your breasts at all. If you have a serious illness or infection, especially if it's a GI infection, contact your doctor to make sure everything's okay to continue feeding. But in almost every situation, you can continue to breastfeed your baby throughout the illness as long as you feel comfortable with it. The biggest things to keep in mind are making sure that you're taking care of yourself, that you're staying hydrated with good quality electrolytes, that you're resting as much as you can, and that you're allowing your body to heal. It can be really exhausting, breastfeeding in general, but add an illness on top of that, and it can be very jarring on your body. You want to prioritize protecting your baby, which is often as simple as having really good hand hygiene, washing your hands really well before and after nursing, limiting contact if you feel comfortable with that. A lot of people just will keep having their baby with them, but if it's a serious illness, you may want to enlist the help of another caregiver. Some people recommend using a mask if you have a respiratory illness. I'm not sure that is completely necessary, but if it makes you feel better, you can definitely use a mask if you have a respiratory illness where you're coughing and sneezing and you just want to limit that contact and those airborne particles as much as possible. You also want to do lots of skin to skin when you can. That will help you heal, it will help your baby, and it just helps your milk supply in general. So let's talk about protecting your supply, both if you are ill or your baby's ill. If your baby's ill and they are not nursing nearly as much as they normally would, I would make sure you're hand expressing using a hand pump or just a regular pump to make up the difference. You don't have to pump all day long, but it is going to be beneficial to pump a couple of times throughout the day to make sure your supply doesn't drop too much. I would also recommend eating nourishing foods, having good quality fluids with electrolytes, and just resting as much as possible, whether you or your baby are sick, because that stress of your baby getting sick can make a dip in your milk supply. If you are sick and you've experienced a drop in milk supply, this can be a little bit trickier, and I find some people have trouble recovering from it, especially with more serious illnesses. Usually I will recommend working with a lactation consultant like myself to come up with a plan specific for you, but often that will involve some power pumping, doing a nursing vacation where you just nurse more frequently, and obviously monitoring your baby's diapers to make sure that they are getting enough. Usually with milk supply drops related to illness, we can see a rebound of the milk supply, especially if milk supply was established appropriately to begin with. But again, I would reach out to a lactation consultant, or you can check out my guide, Milk Supply Magic, which has a lot of really good tips that help to give you quick wins for increasing your milk supply. And you can grab that in the video description below. However, despite some of your best efforts, your milk supply might still drop. And what I generally recommend doing is to remain consistent, make sure you get back on a good, consistent feeding or pumping schedule to make sure that your body gets the signal that there's still a baby that needs that milk. And so I know it can be hard when you're sick or when your baby's sick to be consistent, but just try to do that as much as you can, especially once you're feeling better. I do think a few days of power pumping doesn't hurt, and it can give you a boost to get past that initial drop. You want to support your body with extra calories, hydration, and rest, which I know some people will laugh and say, how do I get rest with a baby? But resting as much as you can, enlisting help from others around you, and just letting your body do what it has to do to recover and start making milk again. You can also add in simple galactagogues. There are food-based ones like oatmeal, oats, coconut, and dates. I have a good list that I can share below. There are herbal supplements that you can incorporate, and I would work with a lactation consultant to figure out if one of those is best for you. Your baby being sick or yourself getting sick while you're breastfeeding can feel like a huge letdown. However, it is often recoverable for most moms with the right techniques. So I hope that this video was helpful and that you will be able to nurse successfully through any illness that your baby has. If you have any questions, be sure to drop them below and I would love to answer them. And we'll see you next time.